I think part of the appeal of those sort of really wonderful dramas that we all enjoy, the likes of Downton Abbey, Upstairs, Downstairs, and even the big epic films, written, of course, by Julian Fellows. I think the thing that we enjoy about those films is to see how people lived so many years ago, particularly downstairs. Anybody else agree, chums? And I remember being very young and enjoying, Upstairs, Downstairs, but I was always more fascinated by the roles of, say, Hudson and Rose, Mrs. Bridges, the footman, all that sort of stuff, and thought, well, how do they survive? What do they do? And as you remember in all those big dramas, there were all sorts of things that happened if they fell foul of their employers. Of course, with the Bellamys in Upstairs, Downstairs, you'll remember that they seem to have more of a caring nature, getting the doctor for Mrs. Bridges, not kicking people out, inviting them back in, even if they'd been, shall we say, a little bit difficult the first time around. Remember the character of Pauline Collins as the music hall star, Thomas and Sarah, all of that? Well, you see, life was a little bit different if you actually worked for the royals in the 18th and 19th century. But that all changed, all thanks to a prince. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much as ever for joining me on a beautiful day here in the United Kingdom. So warm. Yes, I know I moan about the weather, but it is a beautiful day. And you are not into summer yet, so you just never know what it's going to be like, do you? Wherever you are in the world, I hope things are going well for you. I hope you're keeping well. If you're recovering from anything, chin up, I always think it could be worse. You could run out of fig biscuits. Yes, think of things like that. Always puts a smile on your face, doesn't it? If you think, goodness, could my life get any worse? And you think, yes, fig biscuits could be out the door, So always try and find a positive is my motto. And as I say, welcome one and all brand new subscribers. It's lovely to have your company. As many people know who have been with me a long time, I've always loved those dramas like Downton Abbey and Upstairs, Downstairs, The Cedar Tree, stuff like that, because I think they gave a snapshot into life that, it was a glorious life, but particularly if you were well off, there was this sort of fishing, shooting, hunting, dinners made for you, banquets and balls that you attended, dressing for dinner. What a paraphernalia. But if you had nothing else to do, this is exactly how you filled your time. Remember, the gentlemen went off for cigars and brandies, and ladies, of course, would sip coffee and gossip in another room. Allegedly. I'm putting no shade on any girls, let me tell you. But what was interesting when doing some research, when you were sort of part of that royal enclosure, and say you'd started to work for Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, or indeed one of her many children in that servant capacity, what was interesting for an initial period was when you left, you weren't actually allowed to say that you'd worked for the British monarchy. And this was because they didn't want people knowing that, in fact, staff had left. This one might raise questions. How would and why would anybody want to leave the employ, say, of Prince Albert and Queen Victoria? And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because clearly, like today, we see so many ex-chefs and staff and butlers who get excellent jobs, all thanks to their association to the monarchy, perhaps serving on the Royal Yacht Britannia for Queen Elizabeth. But it was actually this man, and I've often said this about this man, he was so full of foresight and forward-thinkingness, Prince Albert. You see, he persuaded Queen Victoria that, in fact, what they should, the staff, be allowed to do is leave if they want. And more importantly, they should be given the opportunity to actually have a written reference, glowing if possible, from none other than Queen Victoria. I kid you not. And the idea really, and the way that he persuaded her, was this. You see, he said, look, what you have to remember is you are the most famous woman in the world. And if someone's worked for you, then they're going to come with excellent taste, training, and of course, a high level of intelligence. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when you signed on for the royals, even in that particular period, you had to have a good command of English, and more importantly, be able to read and write. And it didn't matter at what level, unless you were sort of really way down the pecking order, say, as a scullery maid in the kitchen. Prince Albert changed all of that and was able to make sure that the Queen, basically said absolutely. And as I told you recently, she recruited many of her staff from the brand new Lady magazine in Bedford Street. And thanks to her, and thanks to the magazine, the whole perception of by royal appointment, or indeed working for the royals, truly did open doors. But once again, it was always down to somebody like Prince Albert who had the foresight to think, well, what would be so wrong in wanting to say, better yourself, open your own cafe, restaurant, bar, with, of course, the added bonus of saying that you'd served and indeed worked for the British monarchy. Either way, interesting stuff. I'm sure you'll agree.